Now that we've got libraries imported, let's see how we can use Python to do some mathematical operations. So I already showed you that it can be used as a basic calculator, but the other thing we can do in Python is we can assign variables different values. So the variables that we have are any name that we can think up. So typically in mathematics, we would say things like x and y. And notice I'm just using a simple return here. I'm not using shift return. If I hit shift return, that evaluates it. In other words, it stores that information in memory. And if I say print x plus y, it will tell me what the value is. This is just an extension of what you saw using it as a basic calculator. So I can assign these variables this way, and I can do print statements like that. The various operators, plus, minus, divide, and power to is star star, are available for doing those type of calculations. So that's a basic variable assignment. Now, oftentimes I try to use more descriptive language when I'm describing my values because it makes it easier to search for those. For example, if I have a bunch of X's in there someplace, it's kind of hard to find. But this doesn't change anything, right? It just changes the name, but I'm still taking the value of 2, storing it in an X value, the value of 2, storing it in Y value, multiplying, taking them to the one to the power of the other, and then printing the result. I can also annotate that result. I can say the result is, and then it will show the result with that text in front of it. So that's a way to make this thing a little bit, more descriptive, make it a little bit easier to read. Okay, so that's our variables and operators. The last thing I want to leave you with today is something, the basic unit of Python, which is something called the list. So a list is basically a set of values. So let me go ahead and delete all these. And I'm going to go ahead and import my math again. So a list, I can just type list as the variable name. And if I say equals, open bracket, close bracket, that's going to define something known as a list. Now, if I print that, that's just going to tell me that I have an empty container, right? This is an empty container that doesn't contain anything. If I want to add things to it, I just need to go ahead and do that. So I can come up here and I can add 2 and 2 as elements. And then if I show those two things, you'll see that those are just now in the list as various elements of that list. And I can make this as long as I want. And I can add also different types of things. I can put in text, and that's going to show up in my list as well. We're going to find that in scientific computing, we usually prefer to manipulate lists that have all the same type of information in there. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, because usually we do operations on them, like adding, subtracting, multiplying, and divide, and it's difficult to do that when you have a string like that. But once you have the list here, you can also access different elements of this list by just writing down its index. So in Python, we start by counting at 0. So this is the 0th element, the first element, the second element, the third element, and so forth. So I can go ahead and put in here, if I type print the 0th element of the list, then it just tells me what's right in there. If I add the third, that's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, and I should get 4. Which means I can also add different elements of this list together. And that's going to take the third index, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, and it's going to add to it the fourth index, which is 5, and 4 plus 5 is 9. So that's how lists operate. The great thing about Python is it lets you add and subtract from these lists as you go. Right? So if I decide later on that I need to put a number on the end of that, I can go ahead and do that. And then if I print the list, you'll see that it's now added 9 on the end of it. If I do that again, and print it again, then it's going to add that. And you'll notice that time, because of the way that I ran that twice, it actually added it twice. So if we want to do that from the beginning, I just need to go back and redo those, entering all those cells from scratch. Okay, so that tells us a little bit about the way that variables work. It tells us how lists work, and it tells us the various operators for Python for doing basic mathematical operations, and it allows us to import libraries. So in the next lesson, we're going to start talking about data types, and we're going to look at how to specifically manipulate things like vectors and matrices using something called numerical Python. And then we're going to get into conditional statements and loops. All right, we'll see you there.